want to hear a really wild stat, though?
Yeah.
We are at 193 countries, I believe we are number 3 in gun violence. Okay? But if you were to take the 5 cities where there is the most gun violence, Chicago, Philly, I think Houston, Chicago, Philly, Detroit.
St.
I
Louis.
don't know if it's LA, but I think it is LA.
Just sheer numbers.
Yep. Right. So it's all these cities. If you were to take out the cities and they all have the strictest gun controls. So it's St. Louis, Detroit, it's Chicago, it's Philadelphia, and I think it's Los Angeles. And they have the strongest, the very, very tight gun laws. Keep in mind they are blue, I'm just saying, not, but if you were to take them out of the equation, we would not be the 3rd, we would be the 189th.
Wow.
That's pretty significant.
Is there any room to negotiate with anti-gun groups? My answer is no. Welcome to another installment of the Connecticut Gun Bench. Today's video is brought to you by P.A.N. Firearms, LLC, P.A.N. Firearms for NRA certification and multifaceted gun training. You can reach us at 203-300-6343 or use our website at www.panfirearmsllc.com. As always, there'll be a link in the description box below. And if you like my channel, like my content, and what I do here, you can support me with the link in the description box. Everything is appreciated. Let's get into this. I came across this very interesting article. It was actually on Ammo Land. I'll leave a link to it. And it's basically talking about a new piece of legislation that Chuck Schumer's trying to push through, which is a Cannabis Banking Legislation Act. Now, I'm not entirely sure what's in it because I couldn't find anything on it. But there's a section in there where basically, if you remember Operation Choke Point, where they basically used the banking system to stop gun sales, if you remember that. And then we went through this whole session where credit card companies were trying to create new codes for gun and ammo purchases, which of course is going to lead to technically a registration list of who's buying what, and which is illegal. But that's kind of the gist of it. But there's an argument in this article concerning negotiating with anti-gun groups, and mostly this is talking about the Newtown Action Alliance. Now, for those of you outside of Connecticut don't know, Newtown Action Alliance was started after 2012, after the incident in Sandy Hook. It's interesting how it took the killing of 19 children and adults in an affluent white neighborhood in Connecticut for these people to come out the woodwork to say we need gun control, when this stuff's been going on in the inner cities for decades. But hey, that's my feeling about it. These same people, we're not talking about gun control when Chicago was mayhem night after night, Detroit, St. Louis, and on and on. But this happened, and we got to start an organization for gun control. Well, isn't that fascinating? And kind of fascist at the same time. But that's just my position on it. Because all these gun groups came out of nowhere. All this legislation came out of nowhere. Right after Sandy Hook. I mean, think about it. There are states across the country that use specifically the incident of Sandy Hook to pass gun control, including states that have had inner city violence for ever, with people losing their lives night after night. But all of a sudden, this incident in Connecticut. But you know what? Let me go into here. And this is, like I said, from Ammo Land. It's an interesting article. And once again, I'll try to leave it in the link in the description box. But titled, "There can be no negotiating on the right to arms with hate groups or with anyone." Okay, and then briefly it's talking about Senator Schumer. He says this, and this is a tweet from the Newtown Action Alliance. Senate Majority Leader Senator Schumer is negotiating with the NRA to pass his priority bill, the SAFE Act, a cannabis banking legislation with Section 10 added as a sweetener for the NRA-backed Senate Republicans, Newtown Action Alliance tweeted Monday. Quote, "We appreciate Senator Jack Reed working to modify the bill to ensure that regulators can warn banks about risky customers like gun retailers," which was basically the gist of Operation Choke Point. "Congress should not be negotiating with the NRA, a terrorist group that is pushing its any guns to anyone, anywhere, everywhere agenda. Guns are the number one killer of our children," which is a lie, "and gun deaths have increased 50% since the Sandy Hook shooting tragedy." And what else has increased from the Sandy Hook tragedy is the amount of gun control that we have. We have more gun control now than we ever had, and yet we have more and more shootings, which tells you that gun control doesn't work. But you can't explain this to these people. And the outright lie of guns are the number one killer of children. Let me explain to you how they got to that. because I've talked about this before. The way they came to that number is that they are now adding 18 and 19-year-olds to the title of children, when in reality, 18, 19-year-old, we know better. You can go to war, you can vote, you can get married, so forth and so on. But now 18 and 19-year-olds are children. That's how they got to that number of guns being the number one killer. And once again, it kind of goes back and extrapolates on the idea of inner city violence, where most of these gun deaths come from. Most of these gun deaths come from these inner cities, which are run by Democrats. Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, shall I keep going? They just pretty much stepped in the shit there with that statement, because gun control does not work. But they want to, use these numbers when it suits their needs. But like I said, if you want, I'll put you can probably see it over my shoulder, where they just pretty much break down how they came to this number. And it clearly says in the same article that if you remove 18 and 19-year-old gun deaths, that number drops dramatically. But they want to, basically gaslight and use this. Guns are the number one killer of children. Well, 18 and 19-year-olds are not children. They're adults. If an 18 and 19-year-old kills another human being, they're being tried as an adult. They're not children. Okay? But that's a lot of vitriol-drenched lies to unpack. That's the truth. Let's start with NRA's interest, which is passage of the Fair Access to Banking Act, to protect against banks, credit card companies, and other financial service providers setting terms of service that openly discriminate against lawful firearms-related commerce. Gun owners who recall the days of Operation Choke Point, I briefly touched on that, recall the excuses from financial ostracism of FFLs and the pejorative conflation equating them with purveyors of Ponzi schemes and racist materials, to the ridiculous revelation that ATF banker was stiffing porn stars. Pun intended, okay? But Democrat gun grabber Jack Reed's interest is in imposing Operation Choke Point on steroids. That's what Newtown Action Alliance is praising. By mandating Department of Pre-Crime snitchware via merchant category codes. I did a video on that where, the credit card companies started to kind of talk about implementing it, and then they kind of abandoned it once Congress went after them for saying, why do you need codes for specifically guns and ammunition purchases? But developed by Progressive Bank, affiliated with a leftist union that rakes in millions from Dem campaigns, liberal organizations, and has organized rallies and marched in solidarity with communists. Suddenly motives are seeing less and less about gun safety and more about totalitarian civilian or citizen disarmament. That's exactly what they want. So let's look at the last part of Newtown Action Alliance missive. Congress should just impose such edicts and not include the largest lobby group representing millions of gun owners in its deliberations. Leave them with no voice on what is going to happen to their property and to them if they don't comply. That's our democracy these people are always ranting about, and somehow it makes sense to impose unconstitutional infringements right down to the dreamed of confiscations on the most heavily armed civilian population on the planet, a substantial number of whom will not disarm. And that's true too. But yeah, that's a good point. When he says, when you hear Democrats say, an attack on our democracy, they're talking about their version of democracy, the left's version of democracy. The censorship side of democracy, the open border side of democracy, the rampant inflation, the violation of the Constitution democracy. That's what they're talking about when they say our democracy. And tens of millions of peaceful Americans who have murdered no one, robbed no one, threatened no one, and who simply want to be left alone by a government that respects the Bill of Rights are terrorists. Meaning, if the word has any meaning, they need to be taken out with extreme prejudice, whether by Joe Biden's F-15s, Eric Swalwell's nukes, or else bundled off the backroom without trial. As for that last bit about guns being the number one killer of children, criminal defense attorney Tom Grieve put it together in a pretty useful and succinct set of facts to counter those lies, which I pretty much touched on. In Newtown Action Alliance's case, they've relieved us of any obligation to engage through their use of insults, libels, and lies. That's because a critical mass of us not only won't negotiate on a Second Amendment beyond know your move, but we also want nothing to do with self-admitted hate groups. A literal hate group, don't take my word for it, take it from theirs. This is a 3-year-old pinned tweet. And this is from the Newtown Action Alliance. Retweet if you hate the NRA. That's fascinating. But some gun owners will reflect on Fairfax management under Wayne LaPierre and think they may have a point, but it wouldn't matter who ran the group. They'd hate non-compromisers who refuse to negotiate rights away. Even worse, and for the record, NRA is not for anyone everywhere agenda, true, far from it. But just as Donald Trump is an avatar for voters who believed in the agenda that he ran on to get elected, the NRA in this case is an avatar for all gun owners who believe in defending the rights to keep and bear arms. But unrestrained public outbursts like that are why these people are quickly becoming my favorite gun grab group. Every time the bigger ones start to sound to the uniformed like they're being common sense and moderate, just as something these fanatics post to show how any compromise acceded to by Patriot collaborators will never be enough for these string pullers behind disarmament and the lunatic zealots living the cult life. But I'm going to come down to here, and they're so cartoonishly over the top, I'm starting to suspect NAA chair Paul Murray of being our gal in the gun ban camp, with a real agenda to make the grabtards look increasingly ludicrous to everyone who is, for the most part, normal and still reachable. Okay, let me come out of here. Now, Paul Murray, if you don't know, is basically the chair of New 10 Action Alliance. If you don't remember her, and she's circled in this picture here, should be second from your left already. I'm pretty sure I'm going to put it over my right shoulder. But if you remember, she did a news conference or whatever you want to call it, where she advocated for stacking the Supreme Court because she didn't like the rulings that were coming from it.
Sandy Hook survivors and gun control advocates are hitting the road calling for change.
We are urging Congress to expand the court and instill some ethical standards for them.
If that isn't some downright fascist garbage, that is it right there. I don't like how the Supreme Court is ruling, so I want the court stacked to get the results that I want. That's exactly what she is hinting at by saying we need to stack the Supreme Court. This is who these people are. They're not interested in your safety. Let me be clear about that. Because like I said, New 10 Action Alliance didn't start until after Sandy Hook. And you can look at it any way you want, but it's interesting how it took the death of 19 white children for these people to come out the woodwork and actually start to take notice. Yeah, and their only answer is, we need to make laws against people who have done nothing wrong. This is who they are. Hey, I've been calling out this bullshit for years. Inner city violence has been going on for decades. Where are these people at? Where they at? Yeah, whatever. Whistling in the tulips, cutting their lawn and their white picket fence in, suburb Connecticut. But this happens, oh yeah, we need to do something about guns. They're full of crap. And I'll call them out on their borderline racism at the drop of a dime. But I found this article to be interesting because you can't negotiate with these people. There is no negotiating with these people, so why bother to try? And it's unfortunate that we've come down to basically it's my way or no way situation from both sides. There are answers, but one side is not interested in actually dealing with the criminal element. Period. They're not interested because they will not pass laws that addresses crime. It's always, we need a law that basically takes away something from someone who's done nothing. And it's really unfortunate. But interesting article. I'll leave it in the description box. You can read through it. But let me know what you think. As always, you can leave your comments in the comment section below. And as always, any statements of violence or statements that lead to violence will be removed. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell when you're notified the next time a video goes live. I will see you on the next one. Peace.